So my name is Kelsey. I have been here for about a year and a half now. I have a Bachelor of Science in General Horticulture. I've been working with the Houseplants for about a year or so. I've always had houseplants in my house. I've always been kind of a plant person. And I'm still new to it. I mean, I have only been doing it for a couple years. So I'm sure you guys have things to teach me as well. Most of my knowledge comes from dealing with them in here in the greenhouse. It's a little bit different, but having to water them and take care of hundreds of houseplants every day. You figure out who's moody and who's not moody. So yeah, do you guys have any questions from the start for me?
Which ones are moody?
A lot of them, all of them.
From Hawaii.
Oh, okay. It's different. And I'm coming down with a cold, so I'm sorry if my voice doesn't project. I probably will be drinking lots of water to wash that down so that I am not tripping over my words and coughing. So please excuse me. So I'm going to start with an overview of basic things, and then I like to categorize houseplants because that's how I can best say this is how this one needs care. And it's pretty complicated. I have a lot of categories that I like to keep things in, but that's why I gave you guys the handout so that you guys can, take it back home and then you'll remember things that I said. And so I categorize it kind of two different ways. And then I didn't put anything about pest issues on here because we are going to do a houseplant pest class, but I will kind of talk about it just a little bit. So we'll start with the basics. Houseplants are from tropical regions, usually. Sometimes they're from just warmer regions like the cactus that aren't tropical. Some cactus are tropical. That is an important thing to keep in mind when having houseplants in your house. They're not from here. So we're taking a plant from its native region and we're just plopping it in this stagnant room with no humidity and really kind of not very good light. And so that's kind of why houseplants are challenging, obviously. So it's important to remember that. Knowing where they come from, which a quick Google search can often lead to you to know where they come from, really can make a difference in knowing what they need because you know kind of what that region does. And secondly, the other important thing is that plants have adapted to live in nature and they can adapt to live in your house. They're pretty versatile, the seasons change in their natural environment. So they're used to adapting to different places. So when dealing with a houseplant that's kind of fussy, you have to remember that it's adaptable, and sometimes patience and time is all that it needs because it just needs to figure out where it's at first. When you're looking at the categories, I put examples. It's not set in stone. That's kind of the point I'm making. It's just a general guideline. You can kind of sway out one of the different guidelines for that plant and it'll usually be okay. So a lot of plants, like people say you can't grow pothos in full sun, but you a lot of times can if you have enough humidity and they get enough water. So you kind of have to, if you lose one thing, you have to give in another area. All houseplants benefit from humidity, maybe with the exception of cactuses, obviously, and there's probably 2 or 3 others, but they're all tropical in nature. The humidity in those places is twice what it is here in Spokane, and what it is in your house, because houses are a lot drier than outside. So there's a few different things you can do to fix that. A lot of people will put their houseplants on a dish with rocks and water in the bottom. That works for like the general area if you're just having one houseplant in a room. Sometimes people will mist their plants, which that it works pretty good, but you have to babysit it. You have to be the kind of person that will do that every single day. And it's direct. It touches the leaves, which if plants aren't from an area where there's a fog belt, which means coastal or high up in the mountains, they're not really gonna love having water on their leaves. They just want ambient humidity. The best thing is a humidifier. And you can, when you buy them, it'll say the square footage. I like to just kind of cluster all of my plants around the humidifier. So if you're the kind of person that has a plant shelf, a humidifier is a good thing to keep in that area. If you're having plants, as decor around your house, that might not be as practical. Humidifiers are very good for your health also. So putting a humidifier in a couple different rooms that you spend a lot of time in and that your plants spend a lot of time in is good. A lot of plants can live without the humidity. The dracaenas can live without humidity. Snake plants can live without humidity. The tough ones really, they don't need it, but it will make them flourish. They love it. So, and then I do that. I have a humidifier and I mist my plants as well whenever I think about it, just to give them a little bit extra something going on.
What plants are the hardiest that you can't kill?
We will go over that. That is one of my categories. Plants that are beautiful with little effort. Okay, so the other thing is in nature, there's wind constantly. I mean, there's always airflow. Even if you're outside and you're like, oh, there's no wind, there's airflow. So it's important to give that to your plants also. Most of them will tolerate without it, but adding a fan to your main plant room will really help them. It strengthens the stems and it increases the water uptake because it's blowing air over the, yeah, that works, ceiling fan. As long as there's air movement, it'll make a huge difference. And if you're having plants that are a little bit more testy, like abutolons or night blooming jasmine or jasmines, or the, now I can only think of the scientific name, Stephanotis, those will really benefit from the extra airflow. It helps stems, it helps the water uptake, and it just gives them more of a natural environment. All plants are going to be happier with a lot of light. The direct sun in our house is still not super direct. The only place where it's like really hot and direct is a south-facing window at the peak of summer. Other than that, most plants will probably be okay in our region close to a south-facing window. There's a few, like peace lilies probably wouldn't like it very much. The Chinese evergreens sometimes can protest to it. But most plants will appreciate extra light if you can give it to them. If you can't, you can do plant lights, or you just get plants that will tolerate the dark, which most plants will tolerate less light than you think they will. There's a few exceptions, but a lot of plants, what you can do is you overwinter them in your house, and then when you put them back out on your patio in the summer, they kind of build up their reserves and they build up their food. And that way you can keep plants in your house over the winter in kind of a dimmer spot, and you don't have to worry too much about them dying over the winter. Then they go out on your patio, they get all happy, then you put them inside, they kind of are like, oh, I don't like this, but by the time they're really unhappy, they go back out on the porch and they flush back out a bunch of new growth. So I do that with most of my plants. I don't do that with my most prized plants because I don't want them to get bugs. Because taking stuff outside and bringing it in, it creates a whole nother ball of wax. We're gonna do a whole class on that eventually. So north and east are dark, and south and west are bright. And then as you get farther away from a window, obviously it gets dimmer. the back of a south-facing room is about the same as an east-facing window. So, and you can get light meters, but just, you can use your eyes too, and if you've been dealing with houseplants for a while, you can kind of gauge the light in your house. So watering, a schedule is great, but I'm not necessarily an advocate for a schedule because plants aren't on a schedule. Plants are on their own time. So I like to have a checking schedule. So I say, okay, I check my plants every 3 days or something like that. And I touch the soil. And then that way you know for sure. If you just water a plant every week without fail, in the summer you're probably underwatering it, in the winter you're overwatering it. So you have to kind of adjust with your plants as the seasons change and the temperature of your house changes, the humidity of your house changes, everything is going to change through the seasons. And so the more you stick to a schedule, the plant's going to be thrown off because plants don't know what day it is. They just know what the season is doing. To check the moisture level, you can do it by feel, soil color, or weight of the pot. Feel, weight of the pot, like how much it weighs. So it's best to start by feel, which is kind of inconvenient because nobody likes sticking their hand in dirt. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people do, but yeah, exactly. So, some people, I don't really like doing that. I can tell by the weight. But you can get yourself to know how to check by the weight by touching the soil. So you touch the soil and you're like, okay, this plant's dry. You pick it up. All right, that's what it feels like when it's dry. Then you water it and you let it sit for a few hours, let it drain out, dump your dish that it catches the water in, and then you pick it up. Okay, so that's a plant that's watered. A few days, pick it up. Okay, so that's a plant that's drank a little bit of the water. And eventually you'll be able to teach yourself about, how that should feel. And over time, you'll pick that up. You'd be surprised how quickly you pick it up. Soil color it's a little bit more difficult. Some people have an eye for color, some people don't. I don't really have an eye for color. I've picked it up, but different soils are going to be different colors. So unless you have the same soil, you're going to have to kind of be adaptable with it because some soils have more organic matter, so they'll be darker. Some soils have more bark, they'll be lighter, peat, coir, it all affects the color. But if you just have, a few plants, you can kind of learn what color the soil is when it needs water based on the weight or the feel or however you've been checking it. Obviously with huge plants, you can't be picking them up. So doing it by feel or by appearance is probably the best way to check large plants. Any questions? Okay.
Can you just use a soil probe thing that tells you moisture?
I don't like those.
Why?
I do not like moisture meters because more often, I very rarely hear success stories about moisture meters. Nature gave us really good moisture meters that we used when we were farming, when we were a long time ago, our ancestors, and we've evolved these really, really, really good moisture meters, and I just think this is the best thing we've got. Some people, they get a really nice one and it works really good, but it's hard to know if it's working because you don't necessarily know what's going on down there because you haven't felt it. And I've just had so many people come to me and they say, I don't know what's wrong with my plant. I use my moisture meter. And I'm like, well, there you go. And I hear it a lot.
I actually use one all the time.
And it works successfully.
I use it all summer long. And my neighbors, honest to God, want to know what I'm doing because it works. And
Do
I
you
use
have
it in
big
my
plants?
lawn. And I have
Good.
Well, that's right, because if
Yeah,
you
your
feel
finger doesn't go.
some of your plants
Yeah.
are this deep, and
Yes.
I have to go all the way down.
Yeah.
It's wet down there, but I think, okay, well, what's happening up here? So that's where I'm
Yeah,
confused.
that's good to hear. That's my opinion. That's not a fact. That's an opinion that I have about moisture meters.
I actually do it, and I use it on my
Good.
lawn, too, and
I'm glad.
it looks gorgeous.
Did you got a really good quality one?
I don't even remember how much. I actually have two. I have one that's
Okay.
green, one that's tan, and I really do. I use them outside all summer long. And then
Good.
I adjust my sprinklers accordingly.
Yeah.
And then, honest, my neighbors ask me, who do you hire for your lawn and your flowers?
Cool.
So
You're
I'm
like
a
myself.
believer, and that's why I bought a second one because I set it.
Good.
There's a two-prong or a one-prong?
Both of them are one prong.
Okay, I have a two-prong that seems to be my favorite. The other one doesn't register. Probably isn't working.
Let me know the brand. If you guys remember the brand, let me know the brand.
I don't even know
Because
that.
I had one and it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
I've used it for years.
Yeah.
And I wondered if there's battery in
There
it.
could
I
be,
didn't know.
because they register light, too.
I think it just, oh, mine doesn't. Mine's
They
strictly
might have that.
for moisture.
Okay.
The water and they'll say it's wet.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let me know the brand.
Okay.
Because I've seen a lot of really bad ones.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
For the succulents, as you have behind you, I have quite a few of those, and I probably should not have put them in the little pots that I did, but I was collecting these at flea markets, just a little silver or silver plated or whatever, little cream or sugar things and all kinds of different things. And I put rocks in them, I put soil in it, but you can't tell. I have little rocks at the top too, but you can't tell if they're moist or not. And I just don't know how often to water them.
With
And when they
succulents,
start looking a little,
yeah.
then I go, okay.
You can
Just
almost let them get
sprinkle it
mushy.
Like a little, like one of those ketchup squeeze bottle things.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Put a few drops in there. I don't really water them.
Those are good for watering little plants.
Yeah.
Um,
It's really hard to tell on those.
Can you lift it? Like she said, a lot of my.
Feel the
tiny,
weight.
I lift.
They're in tiny little pots.
But if you, like today I checked mine.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They just
Yeah,
lift
I
right
saw
out and I went,
that.
oh, time to water.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That works. With succulents, I just let them go. You can almost, something just fell down. You can almost just let them go till the leaves get kind of wrinkly. They'll pop right back. So you just watch them. Another way you can tell, which takes a really good eye, is the color of the leaves. They'll get kind of pale when they need water, and succulents will do that. They'll get like a weird, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but the only word I could think of is pale, and they'll sort of lose their color. Yeah. And that one, you can do it by that too, and then that way you know they need water, obviously, really badly. So, yeah.
But you never should water them a lot, correct?
Well, you
Like
could,
even these
you don't
sizes
have a
back
hole
here.
in that pot, right, is what you're saying?
There's no holes in the
Yeah,
pot. That's
so
where
I
I've
would be
got the
really
rocks
careful.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be really careful about, because you don't want to flood that out.
No.
Yeah, so you just water it enough. You kind of figure out over time how much a container like that needs, and you just don't water it so much that it gets mucky.
Yeah.
Containers without holes, I don't like them just because it's hard to tell, and it's so easy to just have a mucky bottom and not know that that's going on. And even with the rocks. Yeah. Yeah. If you're careful and you're a plant person, you can do it. It's fine. And even like there's terracotta that don't have holes. That's fine because it breathes through there. But you have metal, and so it's just hard to tell.
Right.
Yeah.
I suppose I could drill holes in the bottom.
Yeah.
I did with mine.
Oh, yeah.
Pots for outside.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yeah.
Even the clay pots are, the rep that does our terracotta gave us a drill bit specifically for drilling through the terracotta, which I always was scared to crack it. So, okay, so on to repotting. It should be done probably at least once a year, just kind of depending on the plant. Some plants can go years without repotting and not care at all. For vigorous plants, it needs to be once per year. That's just things that are putting out new leaves almost all the time, because for every leaf there's some roots too.
So would that be like, is that a ZZ that goes like, sends out those long?
I think so.
Okay, so I've had one for maybe 2 years and I've never transplanted it, and it's starting to kind of look.
Probably repot.
Okay,
Then
how
they
much
get,
bigger do you go?
I usually anywhere from 2 to 4 inches on all sides. So I guess 4 to 8 inches bigger. And it just, if your plant is super vigorous, you can go up a little bit more. If it's like a ZZ, I'd probably only do like 2 or 3 inches, just because they don't grow quite as fast as some other things. They are quick to spread themselves out though. So you could go 4 inches and it would probably be okay. And then you'd have a little bit more time to work with. I don't advocate for potting up bigger just to give yourself more time, because then you end up having watering problems, because that outer is wet and the inner is dry, or the other way around. So
Don't
yeah.
they say with Christmas cactuses though, you're only supposed to go up a little bit, because Christmas cactuses love to have
Be tight.
their roots tight.
Yeah.
Somebody once taught me to
Just a little bit.
Well, if they're thriving, then just don't do anything.
Mine broke the pot actually, so it's time I need to.
Yeah.
Mine like every 2 weeks, and I just water it like I do any other plant. It's beautiful. Yeah, but I do it about every 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's about right for one
Mine
of
starts
those.
to get buds.
Yeah, some people just barely dribble a little water.
Oh, I
on
flood
them,
mine.
and they keep them really dry, but I don't.
Yeah, I like to flood plants completely all the way through, and then wait for them to dry out, and then all the way through. A lot of people will like drizzle like every day, and you're never getting down into the lower roots. A lot of times that when people have watering problems, that's what they're doing, is they're like, oh, I give it a little bit of water every day, but you can't do that because you're only soaking.
That's like us having a sip of water.
Yeah, you can't just take a sip of water every day and think that's enough. Yeah.
Back to the repotting. Boy, that's something I sure don't do, and I sure need to. But I've heard that it's, I don't know. Should you pretty much get rid of all the dirt that it was in?
Not necessarily.
Or should you add all new dirt, or should you have a combination of old and new, or
I like
Clean all the
to,
roots off or anything, do you?
well, so you can repot something on time, which is when, if I had a picture I'd show you, the roots are, you can still see quite a bit of soil, but you do see roots on the outside, just, a little bit. That's ready for a repot. Then there's plants where the roots are circling around and around and around, and it's been way too long, and you should have repotted it last year or the year before. Yeah. Those ones, people think I'm crazy, but you just slice the roots on just the surface, just a little bit with pruners or a razor, like 6 or 8 slices around the outside, and then you just plop it in and fill the dirt around the side. The roots being cut will stimulate them to grow into the new soil, and that's how you prevent that, to keep it from circling and circling and circling. Yeah.
Killing the trees.
Yeah, and I've done that with these houseplants. I've done it with nursery trees, and it has never failed me once. So I promise it doesn't kill
Break it
them.
apart, you just slice it and stick it in?
I usually just slice it and stick it in. If it's really bad, I'll kind of loosen it a little bit, but slicing it is enough to get the roots to branch out, because you're cutting so many roots when you do that. That's so much that there's so many signals to the plant to make new roots that it will have no problems making new roots.
Interesting tip. Thank you.
Yeah. And you can look up diagrams of that on the internet, and you see, like, if you look up root bound versus needing to be repotted. I don't know exactly what the keywords would be. You'd see the difference.
It'll show you, because I
Yeah.
actually didn't know that back when I was a very young, probably younger than you, when I had a first home. I bought a tree, stuck it in the ground, planted it, planted high, I'll never die, planted low, I'll never grow. Did all that. And all of a sudden, 2 years later, it died. Well, it was root bound.
dug it out.
Yeah.
So it had that
Yeah.
root. So I know if it has that thick root like that when you buy them, because it does have them.
Yeah, yeah,
I've cut that entire root off.
Mhm.
If it's packed tight in there. 'cause
Yeah.
the trees are-
you can, the mat of roots on the bottom, you can cut the whole
slice
thing
the whole
off.
thing
Yeah,
Like a pipe blade, pull them off.
yeah.
No, I take a saw. I cut the- Honest, right? Am I
No,
right?
no, you're right. I've done that. You're right. We've had some really trees we've had for like 3 years, and we just,
I buy a lot of them.
yeah. Okay, so the only other thing with repotting is the type of pot and the type of soil. The type of pot, if it's a plant that, like a fern that needs a lot of water, stay away from terracotta just because it dries out so quick. If it's a plant like a cactus, go for terracotta because you're gonna get you won't have to worry as much about it getting overwatered. In terms of substrate, it's so different for every plant, really, that you can most plants will grow just fine in regular potting soil. There's a few exceptions like orchids, but you can actually grow orchids in soil. It works just fine. You just have to be careful about the watering. I like to grow them in bark, but it's not impossible to grow them in soil. So, I don't know, I just like simplicity, so I just tell people potting soil, it's fine. As long as it's a good quality potting soil, you're okay. Cactuses and palms and citrus and a couple others would probably prefer a cactus mix. So between those two, you can pretty much deal with any plant. Plants that are epiphytic or semi-epiphytic, which means they grow on trees. Orchids are epiphytic. A lot of the philodendrons are semi-epiphytic. Those would appreciate a little bit lighter soil, so you could, mix bark or cocoa coir or peat in with the soil, or even extra perlite. You could do a little bit, because the cactus mix a lot of times has extra perlite and it has better drainage. Mix that with your regular potting soil. And it's just kind of an experimental thing, but most plants are fine in regular potting soil. You can get really into the soil thing and really into the mixes. It's not something I know a ton about because most of my practice is in growing annuals, which we just put them all in the same soil and it's fine. What I've learned from watching the houseplants is that most of them are okay in regular potting soil. You just have to water them properly. It just changes how they're watered. So you just have to adjust. Fertilizing, March through September, depending on the plant, adjust frequency and concentration. Obviously it goes from cactuses that need almost none to things that are very green like peace lilies that are going to need a little bit more. Citrus that are going to need a lot of food at a high concentration through most of the growing season. Okay, any questions about any of that? Okay, so let's see, what time is it? All right. I'll move on to the care categories, and I'm sorry I used a lot of words like moist and wet. So some people are like, ooh, but that's what we're doing because that's what it describes.
Kind of vague though. I've been to places even like Canada and just north of here, and places in Montana where they have these big, beautiful, gorgeous hanging baskets of flowers, and they are so nice. They're so beautiful. Like, why can't I grow something like that? What is it that they do to those things to make them like that?
Fertilizer.
You know what I'm saying? That's what I was
Fertilizer.
Thinking. Feed them.
You feed the crap out of them.
That must be why. Because
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
This
Oh
isn't the
yeah,
greatest
they
climate
feed
here,
they
so
feed them.
what's the
Plants, I
Food.
I teach people.
You're not going to tell people overkill.
Plants are they're like humans. We like to eat. You need to feed your plants once a week in the summer
Yeah.
when they're growing so, and turn them off, pinch
Yeah.
them off.
I like to eat all the time.
Yeah, pinching those baskets, pinching is the very important.
Die in that freeze. They're
Yeah.
beautiful.
What you say was important.
Pinching. Yeah. That's, they get all, they get all lanky and long if you don't pinch them. So you just whack them and then they'll grow more. They'll still reach the ground.
That was the secret.
Thank you.
What are you doing?
You whack them. Yep.
I have 3 lemon trees, and all of a sudden one of them is wanting to die.
They do
It
that.
has 2 branches going out, and this whole branch, all the leaves have fallen off. And the first question I have is, will those leaves come back, or should I just cut that off? Because all it is a stalk coming out now. Should I just cut that off, or?
Give it a chance. Look at it. If it's hydrated, it's not like pruny. It can probably sprout new leaves. Citrus are very good at sprouting new leaves.
Oh, okay.
I've had them completely defoliate and grow new leaves. They're not super good at it closer to their center, but on the ends, they'll make new leaves pretty quickly. I wonder if you have an insect on it.
Well, it did have little insects, and I called here
Okay.
and said, what should I do? They said, spray it with that stuff. I came and got it.
Okay.
Sprayed it. And I don't know that they're completely gone yet, and that's been
Yeah.
more than a month.
And it depends what kind. Some insects are really hard to get rid of. So, yeah.
I think maybe I should repot it.
Leave it for right now. Don't do anything about it until spring.
Okay.
You can send me some pictures and I can look at it.
Okay.
It's hard to tell without looking.
Where do you keep it in the winter?
In the house.
So
It's
a
always
house
in the
plant.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we had 2 outside, and they were fine outside. I loved the way they looked by my fountain and everything. And then I put them in the garage during the winter, and we had a heat light, we had a shower curtain, we had all kinds of stuff. It cost us an arm and a leg to keep them, but we're from California, so we had to have lemons. And we finally gave up.
They're hard.
Because it's so
Oh, no.
dry here. I mean, people
Yeah.
don't think that. It's
Yeah.
dry here.
Yeah.
Dry.
It is dry.
dry.
You're coming from Hawaii. It is.
Yes. It's dry, and I originally lived in Minnesota, but I lived last
Yeah.
years in Hawaii. It's dry here. Check your house. Get a little humidity.
Yeah.
I had a humidifier put on my furnace, so I can keep humidity at 45.
It's good for you to have
In the winter,
humidity
you have
in
to
your
turn it off,
house.
the windows don't. But I have it runs every time my furnace comes on. If it calls for it, runs humidity through the house, which has been a huge.
Yeah. Humidity is good for us and our
Yes, it
plants.
is.
The lemons are challenging for a lot of reasons. They get bugs. They don't like it when the season changes because the humidity level changes and the light changes. And they really have this weird balance between too much water and not enough. And it's a very fine line. They're difficult. I gave up on mine because I just couldn't take it anymore. It got scale. And I hope yours doesn't have scale.
How do you know?
It looks like it has little white scabs under the leaves.
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, just send me some pictures and I can look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to tell without looking at it. Or you can bring it in too, in the store, not in here. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I will go over these really quick. So these, I think there's 11 categories. I think there's 11. I can't get my page to turn. So the light categories go from low to intense. And I actually there's a sign over in the greenhouse that defines all these categories. I basically just took this from my care tags that I want to print out and put on our plants, and from our signs that we have around for different plants. So low light, and let's see, it goes low and then it goes indirect bright. Low light is an east or north facing window. Indirect bright light could be right up against an east facing window. It could be in a room with a south facing window or in a room with a west facing window. Bright direct light is against a south facing window or against a west facing window. And intense light means against a south facing window, or it might need additional light from a plant light that you plug in your house somewhere. The moisture levels go from very dry, infrequent, medium to, I think, moist is what I called it. Very dry is like succulents. You're going to let it dry completely, all the way down to the bottom of the pot. The infrequent watering are things that really, they tend to rot. So you need to let it dry out, pretty far down into the pot. Medium moisture is going to be things that, let's see, let me think of an example. Something like a shrimp plant, where it has this fine line. It doesn't want to be super wet, but it does need consistent moisture. That soil always needs to be wet, but never soggy. Moist, which is something like a fern, where it can pretty much always be wet, or something like an elephant ear, where you can almost grow it in water. And then I have the fertilizer. There's just 3 levels. Low fertilizer is cactus. Medium fertilizer is pretty much everything, and the heavy fertilizer is going to be citrus and things that you will be putting out on your porch in the summer, like hibiscus, those things that have a lot of growth. The fertilizer is directly related to the vigor of the plant. Plants that grow really fast and that are constantly putting out new leaves are going to need a lot more fertilizer than something like a cactus that hardly grows at all. Which seems obvious, but when you're looking at a plant and you're like, okay, what's wrong with it? That's something to consider. Am I fertilizing based on its vigor rate? Then I have a second sentence, and it will say either tolerates low humidity or appreciates humidity, and that's just things like this. So for example, dark and wet, the third one down on the first page, appreciates humidity. Ferns, sensitive plant, peace lily. These things really like humidity. They thrive with humidity, but they might be okay without it. Most of those things are going to be fine without it, but they will thrive with it. And then obviously tolerates low humidity, things that can tolerate that, tolerate just regular conditions in your house. Stagnant air is without a fan, things that will tolerate not having a fan, and things that will tolerate, that will want to have a fan. Again, those are, they're adaptable. You can kind of adjust most of those things.
I don't have any fans, so I'm just going to walk by them.
Yeah, just have one of those hand fans walking by your plants.
I have plants in every
But you
house.
have a central air,
I
so
do.
that's air movement.
That
Yeah.
is
Yes. I just have a fan. I move out into my living room in the morning.
All right, yes, I have.
And if you have an older house that's a little bit drafty, you don't even need a fan.
Fair.
So, yeah.
Even the new houses. I went on that new house tour, and there was a $449,000 house for sale. And I walked by and I thought, man, that felt cool. My dad was a carpenter by trade, but I walked by. Remember, $449,000 brand new house.
Drafty.
You could feel this paper.
gosh.
Honest to God, and I am not
Huh.
exaggerating.
So they weren't dual glazed? single
No,
pane?
you know, I didn't look that close. All I was very disappointed in the
You would think
workmanship.
they'd be
To
coated.
be honest, it actually
Yeah.
did this.
Huh.
It was up and down. I swear to God.
Insane.
Interesting.
400
And it's drafty. Okay, so do you guys have any questions about those things, those categories? I don't want to spend too much time on them because they're there and they're pretty straightforward. I titled them. I didn't have titles on them before I titled them, just so you guys would have something to remember them by. And I put a few examples. Like on the first page, I have Calathea. Calathea, some of them really like additional humidity. Some of them don't really care. It just kind of depends on how finicky that particular variety is. Most of them like extra humidity. So that probably is a little bit inaccurate, but they will tolerate low humidity. So then I have the care level categories. So I forget who, somebody asked about plants that are easy. Okay, plants, I call them plants that are beautiful with little effort. And I give you a list there. Most of those things, they're,
Which one is that?
that's it's on the second page and it's at the very bottom. Yeah,
Care level.
so,
Snake is really easy. Look at this one.
she's gonna be mad, I just brushed over the mic.
Physical beauty is worth a lot of effort.
Okay, so these plants, there's a list there. These are all things that aren't really going to care how much light you give them, aren't really going to care if you underwater them. Some of them will care if you overwater them, but most people don't have that problem. Most people forget to water their plants. So snake, spider, cast iron, peperomia, pilea, prayer plants, and that applies just to the Maranta, not the Calatheas and the Stromanths. Most philodendrons. Some philodendrons are a little bit testier. Some aglaonema, some people would consider aglaonema medium, and that's the Chinese evergreens. Some people would consider them medium effort. There's those colorful ones right behind us. Yeah, and then there's plain green ones right there.
Oh.
Yeah, those guys. Yeah, and those, they are easy, but some people that overwater or put them in too bright a light have issues with them.
Problem here.
Plants that are very beautiful with a little bit of extra effort. I have cactus and succulents in that category because people think, oh, they're easy, but in actuality, you have to spend every day resisting the urge to water them, which is sometimes difficult for a lot of people. Let's see, a notable one in there is plumeria. You're from Hawaii, you'd know that. I do have some right there. I do. And I do have a couple special ones in the back that belong to somebody. But he is selling a few of them.
Okay.
I don't know if you've met Michael in the nursery.
You know, I forget. I've met so many.
Short,
So
he's short, he's got a mustache, and he's always wears a hat, his hat and his black jacket. He's the nursery guy out there. You'd know him if you saw him. He is so into plumerias. Yeah. I have a couple.
gardenia.
Yeah, and gardenia in the plants whose incredible beauty is worth lots of effort. That's a gardenia because they're fussy, which I actually haven't successfully. I don't have patience for that though.
Well, I had outside is beautiful. Now I brought it in. So it got kind of cold.
Yeah.
Should have hustled it in a little sooner, and it dropped all the leaves. But now it's all leafed out again.
Good,
So I
good. They appreciate a little bit colder room in the winter. So if you get them into like a 50, 55 degree room, gardenia.
Okay, that's good you said that. 'cause
Yeah.
I have it on the table, which is it's an east-south sun.
Yeah. So get it somewhere cold. Yeah, and they'll go almost a little bit dormant. They won't drop leaves, but they'll get dormant. And watch for spider mites.
Okay.
Because those things get spider mites, so bad and so quick.
Mites that fly around.
No, they make little webs.
Oh, like,
They're little red guys.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good
I hate spider mites. Yeah, so just, yeah, watch that. That can cause defoliation also, is spider mites. Let's see. I put hibiscus in the plants with a little bit of extra effort because they're not too difficult, but you often fight them for watering and you fight them for bugs. And there's someone who likes to be on your porch in the summer because they can be in the house, but it needs to be really bright and airflow and moisture. So putting them out in the summer it solves all those problems. For the difficult ones, eucalyptus, orchids, some anthurium. There's some collector's anthuriums that are very difficult to keep. A couple palms are difficult, but most palms are actually, I'd put them in the middle or the easy category. Most of the palms we sell. Where is it just one of those ones, the colorful? Yeah, those are easy. Those ones are pretty easy to take care of. Just keep the soil moist. And then I have seasonal plants too, and that's the Christmas cactus, the shamrock, azalea, and most of those things, maybe with the exception of the Christmas cactus, will look good for a while, but because they're sort of a seasonal thing, they'll start to decline. Shamrock you can put out, that's one that you can put on your porch and it'll pop right back, and then you take it inside for the winter and it'll kind of be like, you know, a little bit unhappy. Certain varieties do pretty good in the house, others don't. Azalea, like the ones you get from Floral, they're pot wrapped. Those are hard. A lot of times our water is it has so many salts in it and it's so alkaline that's usually what kills azaleas around here. So they need pretty low pH in their soil, which we can't really give them. So eventually those decline.
We have so hard water.
I know. Distilled water on your plants every once in a while, you know, maybe twice a year or something, you do a flush out on your porch with distilled water can really help that salt buildup. Terracotta helps that too, because if you notice as terracotta ages, the salts, it's sucking them out of there. So that will help over time too.
What about just bottled water? When my son was at home, he had
I
semi-bottles of water everywhere. And so I would keep them all and I would water the plants with them.
I think bottled water doesn't have anything in it. I think, yeah, it's just like distilled water, I think.
Yeah.
I let my house water sit. Somebody told me, well, just
That's a
I
thing.
fill it,
Room
gallons
temperature
and
rather
just
than cold,
I
or?
fill it and let it sit, and they said it does something
It
what's in it.
it'll sink. I think what happens is I've read that too in an older plant book. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it disappears.
I don't know what I use it.
So-
What I've read is that the chlorine evaporates.
And that's what
That's possible, yeah.
I don't know, but I had a couple big ones that
Yeah.
I put something in, and I just fill them and just leave them until I water, and at least it's
Yeah.
room temperature.
Yeah. The problem is the salts in the chlorine obviously, but the salts in our water. It's just because our water comes from the aquifer. There's magnesium in it, there's there's calcium in it,
What if you
tons
have
of
a sort
calcium.
water softener or whatever
I do.
in your house?
That'll make a little bit of a difference, but
Is that gonna
then it's,
be way more salty? Or?
I think the way a salt water softener works, and I might be wrong, but I think it bonds with the salts. I don't think it necessarily
I don't do
cleans
water.
them out.
I have a salt or a water softener. I don't do anything with that.
Yeah, I
All
don't.
the minerals in the water.
I don't know if a saltwater softener would make a difference or not. I would just, you're fine to use your water out of your tap, but it helps every once in a while to flush with distilled water. I do that on our carnivorous stuff, and I do that on our bonsais, just because the bonsais are finicky. So, yeah, other than that, we just water with what we have, and we have fertilizer in our water. And there are some plants that I definitely see kind of, they don't love that, but I don't see issues with things until we start growing our annuals, and then you start to see those issues because of nutrient problems. But with the houseplants, we don't really have a ton of problems with our water here, and our water is the same as everywhere else in Spokane. Especially if you live out north, you're on the same water as us, and I don't see a ton of issues in the houseplants with it yet. So there are certain things like the African violets don't like it.
What do they like?
They don't want their leaves wet, and they probably would be best with mostly distilled water unless you're fertilizing. Yeah.
Is it best just to use distilled water for all your watering for your
It's not worth the money or the effort.
If you have a lot of plants.
Yeah, it's not worth the money or the effort. You do it once a year, and you'll go get the bottles from Linco for 99 cents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you're not investing a ton of money into it. If something's working, don't fix it. So,
They say that's
yeah.
really, that's the best. And then if it's broken, then you better.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's certain plants, like when you have a plant that doesn't have a hole in the bottom, the buildup of salts is going to kill that plant eventually. It'll take time, but eventually it'll build up a lot of salts. So,
And then I'll throw it out and come back here and buy some more.
They'll always stay in business. They don't want to educate
Exactly.
somebody. That's smart.
Can I bring up an issue I have? You can help me with it?
yeah.
Just your basic ficus plant.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 2 of them, and they're in front of windows, but north and east. One's east in the east winter, one's
Okay.
in the north winter. And they're growing like crazy outwards, but they're not going up. And then one of them...
Reaching towards, that's probably too dark for those plants. Yeah. Ficus grow in full sun.
Is doing well one way, but the other way it's all dying off.
Okay.
And can you, I've done that a few times too, but it's not doing well.
Yeah.
And when the little branches are all crinkly and dry, can you just pop them off?
Yeah, you can prune those back. Yeah, you just take them back to the nearest, wherever they come from, cut them at that point.
I
Yeah.
have one other question. Which ones are poisonous to cats?
The list is long. I always just Google it I do ASPCA, and you just do, like, if you're trying to find out if pothos is poisonous, you go ASPCA pothos, and it'll pop you right into a page. Yeah. Pretty much, I would say probably 70 to 80% of the plants are poisonous.
Because I know my cats
That's if
eat
they
the
eat
one.
them and swallow
I can
them.
show you
Well-
what it is. I just don't know what the name of it is.
The chemical in most plants, the chemical is, I think it's called calcium oxalate, and what it is it turns into a crystal when it touches saliva. And so a lot of times animals will start to eat a plant, and then it's like they just ate a jalapeno, and then they change their mind. Some plants, some animals, like our cats here, they don't get it. They've eaten part of a leaf of a philodendron, and they were okay. I think ASPCA says that's poisonous, I think. But they were fine. They didn't eat much. They ate a tiny little bit. But if you have a dog that's like one of those dogs that just likes to eat stuff for no reason, I would be worried. Cats are a little bit less. Cats will kind of like taste it, and it usually takes a lot more than just a taste to kill them, but
We'll have to go find out
they
what that
could
is that I
get
have
sick,
and look it up because
and you don't want them to get sick. So you can hang your plants, you can put them on a shelf where the cat can't get to or the dog can't get to, and then you don't have to worry about it as much. Some people have cats that are climbers and jumpers, in which case just get non-toxic plants. But most of the time you can keep your plants out of reach of your pets, and most of the time they won't eat a lot of it, but some animals, they're just kind of dense, so they're just wanting a snack, so they eat more than they should. It's better safe than sorry. So always look it up on it. ASPCA has like pretty much every plant on there. There's a few they don't, but most of them. I don't know. It's that ASPCA is that one, that the commercial with the sad angel. Yeah. Yeah.
One-eyed or something.
But they have a huge database of plants that are poisonous and not poisonous. And there's quite a few that aren't poisonous, but there's most plants are poisonous. They don't want to be eaten. So, yeah.
I find also that a lot of the ones that I've looked up, like it basically causes stomach aches.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're probably going to find that one that could do a little bit more than just make your cat throw up. But so far, I've got a bunch of cats, and all I get is like the odd throw up high.
Yeah.
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 Get a lot of those.
And they'll usually leave the plants alone. Some animals insist on eating plants, but I have 2 dogs and a cat, and I don't really have issues. When I'm watering my plants, the cat kind of gets curious and tries to drink the water, which is bad because, you know, fertilizer, and I have systemic pesticide in there, so don't let him do that. But I don't know, they leave it alone. It's easy to train them to leave it alone, and hanging and on shelves too, so yeah.
If you have one you're concerned about, you can always put it in a room that you close the door and keep the cats out.
Yeah.
Or like bird cages are really awesome to.
That's a good idea.
And like hutches.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to like a plant light, you might be able to work those. Like, so there's like lots of options.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that bird cage idea.
Yeah.
And it's cute too.
They
That's
have,
a good
like,
idea.
Really decorative ones at Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can find those really cheap, and they work excellent.
And then they cannot get to the plant, which is good. Yeah. All right.
Is a shrimp plant, a goldfish plant the same?
Shrimp plant is, no, goldfish is the one,
Got one from a friend.
a goldfish plant.
Yeah, so cute. This little goldfish.
They're pretty easy to take care of. The leaves fool you, and the leaves make you think that it doesn't need a lot of water, but they do. They do.
I've been just watering it like once a week, but really soaking it.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's done beautifully. And
Yeah.
It's so pretty and shiny. The leaves.
Has it bloomed yet?
I got just got it last year, and it's probably 10, maybe 10 little tiny.
Oh
leaves.
yeah, they're
One
cute, aren't
there,
they?
One there. So
Yeah,
I
a
don't
shrimp
know.
plant's different. A shrimp plant's like kind of bushy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not, because that's almost, the goldfish are almost like a hanging plant. Yeah, the shrimp plants are bushy, and the little flowers,
Look like a shrimp
they look like a shrimp. They,
with a tail.
yeah, it's really neat. We had a couple of them.
Before, but anyway, I couldn't believe the goldfish.
I had a couple. I think they might have sold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No name on my plant, but there's a dead leaf.
Oh, the
It's
Dracaena.
dark. Did you bring your flashlight?
Yeah, I know. We're about.
Is that
Oh,
what
it's 6
called?
o'clock.
Dracaena?
All right.
I saw another one there, but it said Dracaena, but it was a totally different.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
I had plants that were outside, brought them inside. Now I have gnats.
In the soil or on the plants?
They just fly around.
Okay.
Plant.
It's fungus gnats. I use systemic houseplant pesticide. We have it. It's a bonide. I wish they sold it in big giant things because I'd use all of it. That'll take care of it, and you just mix it in based on the size of the pot. Again, you have to be careful because when you water it, if the cat or the dog drinks it, it is a pesticide. Otherwise, an organic option is Azamax, and we have that too. You just mix it in water and you use it as like a drench. You're gonna have to do it a couple times because it only is gonna affect one life cycle of the gnats. So you have to do it once and then, like about 2 weeks later, and then that should pretty much take care of it. But it's not residual. That houseplant systemic lasts, I think, four months. So I would advocate for that unless you're organic, because it's going to protect your leaves from anything from mealybugs, scale, aphids, and then it's going to protect your roots from those guys, which
So
they
that's your
don't.
systemic?
Yeah, the houseplant systemic. I love it. It works. It's a houseplant systemic. That's literally what it's called. It's from Bonide. We have it's like a little shaker bottle, and you put, tablespoons based on the size of the pot. You water it, and you water the plant just enough for the water to go down in there, but not enough for it to run out the bottom of the pot the first time. And then the plant